Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hi, everyone. It's Susan Coffin. I'm here today to welcome you to Attitude Magazine's ADHD Experts broadcast series. Our guest speaker today, Kuhl, is here to share with Attitude's listeners her very extensive experience and research into homeschooling and general teaching techniques that work for children with learning challenges. She will be talking about techniques both that can be used at home, but also those which can be harnessed and applied creatively for children who are enrolled in mainstream schools. There's some great learning that's come out of the whole homeschooling world, especially for kids with special challenges. She'll be talking about topics such as how to adopt a homeschooling view and how that raises a child's self-esteem and performance, how homeschooling practices can help any child, how the resources and support systems that are built for homeschooling families, and there are many, many of them, can help your child, and how to customize any child's education to tap into his or her strengths. We're really fortunate to have Kathy today. She has extraordinary experience advising families of children with learning challenges. After 9 years of homeschooling her son with ADHD and dyslexia, she interviewed 64 families of children with diagnosed learning challenges, and she wrote Homeschooling Your Struggling Learner. It's a handbook for anyone helping kids with learning challenges. She also wrote Staying Sane as You Homeschool and Encouraging Your Child, as well as many magazine articles. And she has a blog and a website at learndifferently.com with tons of resources, a contact form if you want to reach her. She does phone conferences and speaks internationally at lots of conferences, CHAD, the Learning Disabilities Association, and the Autism Society. So she's a great expert for us, and we are so happy to have her today. So with that, let me turn it over to Kathy again with our thanks for being here today.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for listening. I'm Kuhl, and I equip parents to help children with learning challenges. Mostly, I help parents to establish and improve their own home schools, but many of their best practices can help any parent or teacher. You can find out more at learndifferently.com. But I have a confession to make. I did not plan to homeschool my child. I didn't plan to homeschool my child. It was hard enough to get him out the door and off to school, much less with his homework. Why did I end up homeschooling him? Why does anybody end up homeschooling a child? I homeschooled my son for 4th through 12th grades, and many people do for many reasons. In fact, the latest statistics from the U.S. Department of Education say there's 2 million people homeschooling. 3% of the school-age population is homeschooled. In Canada, it's only 22,000, 0.5% of the population, but it's growing at a rate of 30%. Why do people homeschool? Well, the top 2 reasons are concern about the school environment and dissatisfaction with academic instruction, but there's many other reasons. I interviewed 64 families, as Susan said, who homeschool kids with diagnosed learning disabilities. 26 of them had kids with attention deficit disorder, and their top reasons for homeschooling were academic concerns and difficulty getting help in school. As far as that difficulty and struggle, let me tell you what one mom said. Pat, who lives on Long Island, homeschooled her hyperactive daughter, and she said, even though it was a struggle, homeschooling was the best thing we ever did for her. For her self-confidence and her peace of mind, the stress level in our house dropped 7 billion points. Highly unscientific, but it tells you how Pat feels about it. Other families reported to me that homeschooling was actually less stressful than having their struggling learner in school. Other people homeschooled because the classroom was distracting, or they were already homeschooling a sibling. Some reported that frustration and family life was suffering as a result of having this child in school. Homework, for instance, can be torture at the end of a long day for some of our kids. Some parents reported to me that they homeschooled because their kids were facing ridicule, bullying, or other social problems. Some parents wanted to homeschool because of medication issues. Either a few felt pressure to use medication they didn't think was appropriate. Others wanted to homeschool in order to use the medication but monitor it better. And a couple of families said that under doctor's care they were able to reduce medications while homeschooling. So the other parents reported that it was hard to fit in all their child's appointments with therapists and doctors before or after school. And they appreciated being able to do that schedule those appointments when their kids were at their best. And other parents said they homeschooled because the child had other medical issues. What about us? Well, as I said, I didn't intend to homeschool my son. We were at a great elementary school with a wonderful principal, caring teachers. I was the PTA newsletter editor. I didn't see this coming. But even in kindergarten, my son was complaining that the homework was hard. And because he's dyslexic and distractible, school was a great struggle. In third grade, he had trouble reciting the alphabet correctly or counting to 100. Because of his special needs, I felt unqualified to teach him. But he was coming home from school ready to explode when I'd ask him to put away his backpack some days. I talked with the teachers and they were sympathetic. They said, yes, he's emotionally exhausted. He was starting to think he was stupid, and he's not. He has a bright, creative mind, passion for history, a good actor. So we decided to try homeschooling at the beginning of fourth grade, and you can see from this photo that it was a complete success. He doubled in height thanks to home education. We tried fourth grade, but I didn't initially intend to homeschool all the way through. We took it a year at a time, and when he was reevaluated by a psychologist in sixth grade, he said it was the best thing. Homeschooling was the best thing we could have ever done for this young man. Many people who could homeschool don't know that they could. What do you think of when you think of homeschooling? I interviewed Sarita in Georgia, a homeschooling mom who initially didn't even consider homeschooling because she said, I thought homeschoolers were all antisocial weirdos who sit in the house all day. You don't think of very social, very open, very bright children, she said. But after her son did not do well in public school or private school, she discovered that homeschooling wasn't what she thought, and they don't stay home all day, and it was a great fit for her and her son. Homeschoolers differ wildly. They come from all angles, all perspectives, all religions, and none conservative, political, moderate in their politics, their taste, and everything else. I know single parents who homeschool, working parents who homeschool, although that takes creative scheduling. Some have a grandparent homeschool the child. A few even hire a tutor. Depends on the laws of your state. We'll say more about that later. So homeschoolers are a wildly diverse group. They're homeschooling for many reasons, but they do have a few things in common. They care deeply about each child. They care about learning and education. They don't mind being different for a good cause. They're a lot like the moms and dads who volunteer in classrooms, help out with the PTA, the kinds of parents who stop and listen to a webinar, parents like you. Let me hear you finish this question. Well, I can't hear you, of course, but many homeschoolers have heard this statement so many times. We could say it in our sleep. People say to us, oh, I could never homeschool. I don't have the, did you say patience? We hear that so often, and from folks who haven't tried homeschooling yet. The fact is, raising any child with attention deficit disorder or other learning challenges takes patience. Raising any child, period, requires patience. If you homeschool a child with learning challenges, with attention problems, you avoid certain problems. For instance, you don't have that mad dash to catch the bus in the morning. There's no communications breakdown between parent and teacher. If you want to talk to the teacher, go find a mirror. And you don't have to start your one-on-one time with your child at 4 o'clock or 6 in the evening when the child is exhausted and you've had a long day. There's some other myths people believe about homeschooling. They think they don't have the patience. Some of them think, oh, well, you need to be trained as a teacher to homeschool. The laws vary from state to state, but teaching certificates are not required. The Homeschool Legal Defense Association has a good summary for each state, and their Canadian counterpart website has the details for the provinces of Canada. So look at hslda.org if you want to find out more about the laws in your area. Another myth is that teaching children with attention problems is something best left to specially trained experts, that we need to have teachers to teach these kids. Well, I've taught public school, and I have great respect for teachers, especially special ed teachers. I've worked with some excellent ones. But not every teacher is well trained in how to help students with ADHD. And teachers have limited resources, many students, and many educational mandates. That limits their ability to customize education for each child's special needs. Two of those parents who I interviewed for my book, Homeschooling Your Struggling Learner, said that they had been special education teachers, and both of them are now homeschooling struggling learners. They both wanted me to urge other parents, you can do this. Sounds good, huh? Well, some people get so excited about the thought of homeschooling, they think it's going to solve every problem. But it doesn't. It's not a panacea. Homeschooling won't make every learning problem go away. Customizing curriculum and removing distractions help a lot, but there's no silver bullet. So some myths and misconceptions about homeschooling. Let me talk now about this homeschool view, a homeschool mindset, and how that can help you help your child. It can raise a child's self-esteem and importance. What do I mean by a homeschool view? Well, first, homeschoolers focus more on learning than on school. Education is a way of life. Homeschoolers enjoy learning themselves, and they enjoy learning with their kids and exploring the world together. Because schools have the task of teaching hundreds, sometimes thousands of students at once, schools have to put in place many practices and procedures that you don't need at home, practices that can be hard for a struggling learner. This can be good news for your child who's struggling in school, can eliminate some of those practices that aren't necessary when you're just teaching a few kids. Many successful adults struggled in school. Think of Thomas Edison, Albert Einstein. Many successful businessmen, such as the founders of IKEA, JetBlue, Virgin Atlantic, Kinko's, as well as athletes, artists, actors, and more, struggled with school. When you homeschool, when you have a mindset of focused more on learning than on school itself, then you can focus on more real-life experiences and build on them. This is an attitude that any parent can be mindful of after school, over breaks, and especially over the summer, to focus on enjoying learning, on exploring the world. The painting in this next slide was done by a homeschooled girl who did this when she was 13. It's a great example of a second principle. The homeschool view lets students spend time developing talents. Lily's mom was able to include more time in their homeschool for art because that's one of Lily's special talents. She focused also on nature study and other things that were enriching for Lily. Lily's painting, this beautiful watercolor Lily, won the Autism Society's national competition when the girl was only 13. It's accompanied by a quote, probably the world's most famous autistic person, Temple Grandin. Dr. Grandin from Colorado State said talents are like fragile flowers. They can be stomped on and they've got to be nurtured. It's important to help our kids develop those talents and strengths to build on their passions. So if you're not homeschooling, think about what you will focus on after school and on breaks. Please understand, I believe strongly that students all need downtime. They need some time to unwind, to get outdoors, to relax. So I'm not just saying sign them up for art classes and have them in some structured activity every day. Kids need downtime, but they also need opportunities to explore and develop their talents. Not another class necessarily, but perhaps a book, a box of paints, some tools. Another way homeschoolers can raise performance and self-esteem is because homeschoolers have more engaged time. What do I mean by engaged time? Engaged time is a term that researchers in education use. The way they measure how effective a teaching method is by measuring how much time a student spends actively engaged in the work. as opposed to sitting at a desk listening passively. Are they drawing? Are they writing? Are they talking? Are they thinking? Homeschooling maximizes engaged time first because homeschoolers generally have a better student-teacher ratio than most schools. Remember Pat, the mom on Long Island, who said homeschooling reduced your stress by 7 billion points? She told me that was the best part of homeschooling, but the second best part was that in 3 years, her daughter covered 4.5 grades of material. More engaged time means more progress. Homeschoolers can also have our kids more engaged because we can adjust the workload to the appropriate level. It's not unusual to hear the story of a homeschooled child who doesn't know what grade she's in. A stranger or new acquaintance comes and meets her and her mother and says, "What grade are you in?" And the girl doesn't know how to answer, and maybe she'll give an answer like, "Well, I'm doing 6th grade math, and I'm 10 years old, and we're doing 3rd grade spelling, and I do history with my brothers who are 8, 10, and 14. So she doesn't know what grade she's in. We can flex and help our kids accelerate in their areas of strength and remediate those weaknesses. It's great flexibility. Homeschoolers can also focus on strengths and lead to success. Now, if your child is chronically frustrated with the workload in school, think about whether you can help to adjust that workload. Can you negotiate with the teachers? Can you come up with alternatives? What can be done to reduce that frustration? You may have more flexibility there than you realize. Another practice is not done by every homeschooler, but a few of us do it, and it's called deschooling. This is a technique used by families who have kids who are feeling burned out about education. Because some people do have kids that have lost their love of learning. They have been so accustomed to failure at school, they want to quit trying. Now, again, please understand, I have nothing against schools. I've taught public school, and I know great teachers, but some students have discouraging experiences over and over, and there are some schools that do fail to meet some students' needs, regrettably. When I spoke on homeschooling at Chad's International Conference in 2007, another speaker there said that children are born wanting to learn, but that enough bad experiences can kill that desire. But there's good news. We can revive that longing to learn, and deschooling is one way. Practically speaking, deschooling means that you provide a few weeks when you begin to homeschool without formal lessons, but with many opportunities for the child to learn. Educational outings, nature study, canoeing, museum trips, visiting historical sites, going to concerts, visiting craftsmen in their workshops and studios, and a rich educational environment at home with good music, musical instruments, art supplies, good books replenished by lots of trips to the library. The point of these first few weeks of deschooling is to let the child discover the world around them, to explore art, music, creative expression. Maybe the child will make movies. To stop seeing themselves as failures. We want our kids to heal. We want these injured kids, emotionally injured, to rekindle their love of learning. Maybe this should be your plan for next summer. Another way homeschoolers help our kids conquer their work is by being flexible. Homeschoolers can be more flexible than schools. We can change the curriculum if it's not working. We don't need a board meeting to do that. We can change the schedule in many ways. Many homeschoolers like to tackle the hardest tasks when the students and the parents are at their best, instead of at 5 p.m. after a long day of work and school. In fact, 3 homeschoolers specifically told me that homework hassles were part of why they tried homeschooling. Homeschoolers can also adjust the daily schedule to allow for breaks. This is one thing you can do over any vacation. For instance, let's say you've decided that over Christmas break, you're going to spend a few minutes each day helping with spelling or math facts, just a few minutes. Maybe you're thinking 15 minutes a day. Well, if this is a child who melts down after 10 minutes, work on spelling for 8 minutes and then take a break and then do another 8 minutes. In that break, you could do push-ups, jumping jacks, let them run around the house or up and down the stairs. That little physical break will give your child a break. That's something that in a school setting I couldn't do. I couldn't let my 32 math students run up and down the stairs for a few minutes. Homeschoolers can also flex for appointments with doctors and therapists. We can flex for ill health. I've talked with parents with kids who have seizures occasionally and need to adjust the schedule to allow for a lack of sleep from that. And speaking of sleep, homeschooling is great for sleep-deprived teens. We can flex on the start time. My son was homeschooled for high school. We did not start at 7:20 in the morning like our local school did. We put in plenty of time, but we started at a more reasonable hour. We can also flex to accommodate special opportunities. When my son was in Boy Scouts, I didn't give major tests the day after a camping trip. When my husband had a business trip to England, my son was 4th grade, and we dropped our study of state history. And we spent 2 months studying medieval England, which made our travel in England so much more interesting. This history buff son of mine found another opportunity. Once a month, he worked as an apprentice reenactor. That's him on the right in this slide in his costume for the Living History Museum. He learned how to explain colonial life to tourists, how to process flax to make linen, and much more. Perhaps you should look for opportunities like this for your child to engage in history, in subjects that they care about. Remember, it's not just about academics, it's about loving learning. What special activities could your child do over the summer to build on a strength? Don't just think soccer camp or computer camp. Look at real-world experiences that can help your child. Another homeschooling practice is letting our kids move around. Homeschoolers are often more flexible about whether kids sit and where and how they sit. At home, we can accommodate much more easily. Remember, some people just cannot sit still and concentrate. You have to pick one. Do you want them to sit? Do you want them to concentrate? When we're homeschooling, we can let our kids chew gum, jump rope between lessons. My son practiced math facts on the mini trampoline. The top left picture on this slide, courtesy Jeannie Madge Parker, shows her son studying, I think he's reading his history book, on the trampoline in their backyard. When he felt the need to move, he'd slide the book over, bounce for a bit, and then go back. Other kids like to sit on an air-filled cushion, like the boy in the center of this slide, or on a wobbly stool, like the kids on the right. In Carol Ann Kranowitz's book, The Out-of-Sync Child Has Fun, on page 62, she tells how to build a tea stool out of a couple of pieces of 2x4. The reference for this is on the handouts at my website, learndifferently.com. The tea stool is shaped like the letter T, covered in contact paper. Both the tea stool and the wobbly stools shown in this photograph help build core muscle strength and help some people pay better attention while they're listening. My son discovered in high school that if he ran 2 miles in the morning, it was a lot easier for him to concentrate when he sat down to do his schoolwork. We also moved differently. We averaged 1 field trip a month when we homeschooled. Public school couldn't do that. We couldn't when I taught public school. We managed about 1 field trip a year for our 8th graders. Homeschoolers can also adapt the environment of the place where our kids work at home, and this is something you can do even if your child is in school. Adapt that place where your child does homework for your child's attention problems. Now, the first principle is it doesn't have to look just like a school. For some of our struggling learners, duplicating that environment can bring negative emotions, one mom told me. So think about what your child needs. The principle is what distracts them the most. If they're primarily distracted by what they see, try buying a study carrel or making one out of an appliance box or a trifold board. Are smells distracting your child? Think about what cleaners you're using. Maybe you need to put away those scented candles. Sounds, are they the main distraction? In this photo, you'll see the boy on the left and the middle are wearing headphones. This mom discovered, as a few others have, that some of our kids do work better when they have music to listen to. Others need silence. You can also adapt the environment as you homeschool by moving around the house. One woman told me that she did literature on the sofa, history on the hammock, science in the kitchen, and so on. Some of us focus better if we have something to fiddle with in our hands. On the left side of this picture is a kneaded eraser, also called an artist eraser. That's kneaded like a loaf of bread dough, Kneaded. Looks like a regular eraser until you unwrap it, and then it's like putty. Tangle Jr. is a little plastic loop, sort of like playing with a telephone cord. And the lower right in this picture shows a squeeze toy you can make at home. Just slide a balloon inside another balloon, slide a funnel in, and fill the inner balloon with flour or rice. Tie it up. When you fill it up with flour and knot it off, it actually feels like clay. There's a nearly free fidget that won't roll across the room. The goal with all of these fidgets is to observe what helps your child focus. Ask the teen what helps them. Let them think about it. Don't be too quick to tell them. Help them learn to evaluate what helps them focus and what helps them be organized. I got this idea from Garber, and Spisman's book, Is Your Child Hyperactive, Inattentive, Impulsive, Distractible? I've adapted this from their Actimeter. For instance, to build awareness of distractibility, I'd have a child 3 times a day record whether they felt they were very distracted or very focused. I drew 3 of these on a page and let my son just draw in the arrows without commentary. After a week or so, I asked him to think about why some days are harder. The goal is to increase his awareness. Wow, looks like after swimming, you really seem to focus better. You were so much more creative today and you slept well. We can begin to have those conversations as our kids begin to become aware of what helps them. How do homeschoolers get support? Well, there are many homeschool support groups. They vary in size, personality, expectations. Some are for parents only, others are for kids, provide activities for the kids. So if you're considering homeschooling, try several groups because they're different. Your state homeschool organization should have a list of local groups for your area. And if you're having trouble finding that, email me and I'll try to help you. There's also online support groups. These days, they tend to be moving from Yahoo groups to more private pages on Facebook. If you're considering homeschooling, you might ask those groups if you could join, or ask the moderator if you might join just for the summer to get some enrichment ideas. Also, homeschoolers depend on support groups for parents of kids with special needs, these non-homeschool support groups. I'm a member of CHAD, the Learning Disabilities Association, and they both have parent support groups that are helpful. Another wonderful resource for homeschooling families and for any parents are webinars and conventions. Some state homeschool organizations have free webinars in person and online. The Homeschool Legal Defense Association, the national organization, occasionally has these, and they have excellent newsletter and excellent web pages. Next week, I'm speaking at an online special needs homeschool conference, which is free. Details of that are on my website under talks. But I really love the in-person conventions. The state homeschool organizations and private organizations both run them. Some are small with mainly only 100 parents attending. Others go up to having 30,000 attendees, hundreds of speakers, and many vendors. Most are in between. At these conventions, you can see books, cool educational toys, and alternatives. You can learn about online classes, test methods, meet other homeschoolers, and be encouraged. And these conventions are a bargain. The most expensive I've seen is less than $80. You can get cool ideas even if you never intend to homeschool. Things that you can use after school, on weekends, or on vacation, or next summer. I think every parent and teacher could benefit. What next? I'd encourage you to visit one of those conventions. At my website, you can download for free the first chapter of my book. That chapter is called Is School Working for Your Child? Because I don't assume homeschooling's for everyone, and this book helps you weigh the pros and cons. Get in contact with homeschoolers you already know and check out local groups in your area. You might want to talk with a special needs consultant who can help you plan and find resources. You may discover that you're going on a homeschooling adventure of your own. Here's my son's high school graduation, and it was appropriate for him that we held it on top of a mountain. We didn't plan to do this, and it wasn't always easy, but it ended up being a good fit for us. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can use the contact form on my website. I give consultations by phone and Skype. I've got a newsletter and many resources there to help you. And I want to thank the folks at Attitude Magazine for letting me join you in this podcast. I'm happy to take some questions now.
Thank you, Kathy. This is really inspirational. I want to ask the audience, would you each, all of the listeners, would you just post quickly, what is your biggest concern about homeschooling? I know what mine have been, and I'll bring some of those up, but I'd like to know from the listeners, what are the big impediments to you? Someone just wrote time. So we can discuss those with Kathy because I think, a lot of people, I think everybody's so enthralled by the idea of seeing their child, free to study what they want, but somehow it feels very elusive to get from here to there. So let me just cite some of these great comments quickly. I have to hold a full-time job, says one person, and 3 people, 5 people. This keeps coming up. How do I work and homeschool at the same time?
Okay. Shall I take that one first?
Sure, let's do that one. Yeah.
Okay. There's several ways to do that. If you're a single parent, it's a little trickier, but doable. I know homeschool families where parents work different shifts in order to homeschool. Mm-hmm. I've talked with single homeschool parents, one of whom works from home. She's an occupational therapist, and so she would schedule homeschooling around therapies and vice versa. It's important to realize that when you're working with a child one-on-one, it doesn't take 6 hours to get through all the material. One woman I talked to, an IT professional, stopped her career for a couple years and ran daycare. She taught her kids at home. The one-on-one work between her and the kids was 7 a.m. to 9:30 or so, and then they would start doing their book work while she did daycare. Later, she went back to her IT job, but got an evening shift when the kids were old enough to be home alone or with a sitter. Those are just a few of the strategies you can use. For people who are concerned about how this might possibly work for them, I would say consider just trying to do homeschool over a summer.
Oh, interesting.
I did that the first 3 summers because I was terrified of homeschooling. Even though I had taught junior high, I thought, how does that equip me to help this kid who can't read? So I pulled homeschool resources from friends who'd been homeschooling for years, people who were telling me I should do this and I could and it would be fine. And I just worked with my son a couple hours each morning. Because our last name is Kuhl, we called it Kuhl School. Yeah, it was good. My son said when we got to high school, it was no longer the Kuhl School, it was now the Kuhl Academy. So that's what's on his diploma. But what we did during that time was we worked with him on reading, on phonics, phonemic awareness, and some math, just for, I think, an hour and a half each morning. And it was great for my kids because, and probably for any kids, you know how kids get bored partway through the summer? When we did this Kuhl School in the morning, I think it made the rest of the day more precious to them. It gave a little more structure to the day. So that was a helpful exercise for us without me making the commitment and facing the terror of all the responsibility all at once.
Right. Yeah, that's very interesting. I think the question of structure is a significant one. I see many questions. Many of Attitude's parents have ADHD themselves. So yes. Here we have one comment says, ADHD mom homeschooling ADHD kid. Is it possible for the blind to lead the blind? Other such comments about the structure that would be involved and whether they can pull that off, I guess.
Yes.
How does that actually work, the structure of the day?
That's a great question and a legitimate concern. I have not been diagnosed, but I can tell you that my son did not get his ADHD from his dad. It was from this side of the family, for sure. And I was very concerned about that. I thought, I have a hard enough time getting myself organized. How can I do this? Well, first of all, I was terribly motivated, as any adult with attention issues would be to help him, as I know how much it hurts. I know how stupid you feel when you've forgotten to turn in that paper that you spent so long on, or whatever other issues come along. I know that frustration. I was very eager to help my son because of that. A couple of resources I'll mention. First, yes, structure is your friend. I don't know if you heard a little beeping partway through this talk. I apologize. I forgot to mute my time timer, but I use a time timer. Visual timer. If you haven't seen one, go to my website. They are fabulous. You can get them on Amazon. But the red moves down and gets the red portion of the dial, like an egg timer, but red getting smaller as the time goes up. That helps me structure my time. We had a schedule on a whiteboard, and it was a good thing. It marked off when English started and when we were due to take a break before math each morning. And I tell you, if we didn't have that, my poor son might still be sitting on the sofa listening to me enthuse about the book we were reading, because I needed that structure to help me say, okay, it's 10 o'clock, it's time for a break. I was very patient.
So Kathy, you were pretty structured in terms of laying out the day and what would be done in what time frames.
Yes, yeah. I wasn't down to the minute about it, but we generally spent about 75 minutes on math after that break. And during that time, this is another tip for dealing with that, we never did any part of math for more than about 10 minutes. So we do flashcards, we do new material, we do review, we do stuff on the trampoline, we use manipulatives many different ways. So it didn't feel like 70 minutes of math. It was 6 or 8 different math activities over that period. Another great resource I'll add for parents who struggle with attention themselves, Carol Barnier, that's Barnier, has a great website called Sizzle Bop. Sizzle like a sizzling steak, and it's for distractible adults and kids. And she's written a wonderful book called If I'm Diapering a Watermelon, Where'd I Leave the Baby? Help for distractible moms. She also wrote another book called How to Get Your Child Off the Refrigerator and On to Learning. Those are 2 of my favorites for distractible kids and distractible moms. More I could say about this. I'd be happy to take more questions on that.
Okay. I mean, I guess what I'm hearing is, on the one hand, homeschooling offers the opportunity to be flexible in terms of how time is allocated, activities, levels, but on the other hand, it requires a significant structure. So do you then plan each week and then sort of try to reflect the changes that makes sense based on your child's interests, or at what level does the flexibility come in? Okay, it obviously isn't on a daily basis because you need some schedule, right?
Right. Well, it varies family by family. Some families do unschooling or relaxed homeschooling, which is directed by the child's interests. The parent is kind of the concierge saying, okay, all you want to think about is anime or dinosaurs. Okay, here's some resources. What should we do? Not we're going to sit around and watch dinosaur movies all day, but things much more engaging and appropriate. The way I planned my homeschool was fairly structured because I needed that because of my distractibility. But what I did, actually, let me back up. If you sign up for my newsletter, you get my planning guide for free. It'll come back in an email to you. I help parents set goals. Then the next stage is planning out the year roughly. Mm-hmm. I plan things like math and English are the hardest, so we're doing those in the morning. Science is more fun. We're going to do that in the afternoon. And we're going to try swimming this semester, so we're going to go to swim lessons on Wednesday. By the way, a lot of swimming facilities will love to have homeschoolers in because the pool's kind of empty around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. A lot of wonderful resources for homeschoolers there. We had Fridays were generally a field trip day. That was not that we took a field trip every Friday, but we were able to get out and about. And I'm in charge. I've written this schedule. I can change it if I need to. So if one of the homeschool groups we're a part of has a special activity planned, we'll bump the Tuesday schedule over to Wednesday. that kind of thing. So schedule with flexibility, yes.
Got it. Yeah. So I think that addresses one big fear people have, which is no structure. So the structure is there, and it takes some planning, but you're able to adapt it as you see fit.
Exactly.
Yeah. Another big concern that I see voiced here among the listeners is social interaction for their children. One person says, my son has very few friends. There are no play dates. There's no party invitations for him. And he loves seeing kids at school, which is the only place he really interacts with other children.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on social interaction for homeschooled children?
Yes, that's another very good question. This is raised to homeschoolers so often that we call socialization the S word. And one of the moms I interviewed said, yes, we have a problem with socialization. We have too much of it. As homeschoolers, there's this illusion that we all sit at home, like Sarita said, and I quoted her at the beginning. Actually, homeschoolers are out and about so much that one mom's written a book on car schooling for the younger sibling in the back seat while we're taking older sibling over to this, or vice versa. But more seriously, this is a concern. Some of our kids do have trouble picking up social cues. We started homeschooling just as we moved from one state to another. So my son had the same social situation as if we had changed schools, but we didn't have a school to connect with. It took him a while to find some good friends. We engaged in different homeschool activities. We were out of the house several days a week. One year we were out of the house every day of the week, but that was too tiring for us. It took him a little while to make friends, but when he did, they were such great kids that I thought, oh, it's because he's discerning. So I understand that concern. That's why I would encourage you to check with local homeschool support groups in your area. For instance, where I live in the Northern Virginia suburbs of Washington, D.C., there's an email newsletter that comes out twice a month. It's 15 pages or 20, single-space typed, of activities for homeschool kids to do. So depending on where you live, there are many opportunities out there. But the other thing to say about socialization is you could argue that homeschoolers have a better chance of social success later on than kids in school because they can be out in the community, whereas in school, we were all made to sit in rows, look at the front of the room, and we were with a group of about 25 people our age. I don't know about you, but I haven't been in that kind of situation since I left college. I interact with people of all different ages. And I've run carpools for kids that are homeschooled and public schooled, and granted, this is anecdotal information, but my experience has been that the homeschool teens are much more comfortable talking to the adults and engaging with them in serious conversation than their public school peers were.
Right. I mean, I have the experience of having a friend who teaches a drama class for homeschoolers. So I know from hearing her describe it that this is something that she offers via a local homeschooling organization. Kids sign up for it. It's by the semester. They're all ages. And it sounds like a very, enriching class. And it's been interesting to me to hear her perspective as a drama teacher on working with homeschooling kids. She likes it a lot. So, and that sort of made it clear to me that there were all these enrichment activities available.
Also, some co-ops will organize playground dates where we'll say, okay, next Wednesday, or a couple times a month, once a month, we're all meeting at such and such playground. And those have led to play dates that I organized when my son was younger. So it can take a little longer sometimes, but not always.
Right. So here's a really interesting question from Elizabeth, and her question is mirrored by some other comments. She says, without the break that school provides, I'm worried about becoming frazzled and impatient and destroying my bond with my children.
That is another good question. Destroying my bond with my children is well put. This sounds like shameless self-promotion. That's why I wrote my second book, Staying Sane as You Homeschool, to address that question. I think it's important for any parent to take care of themselves, and people who are listening to a podcast like this, I know you're people that want your kids to succeed. You care deeply So what I generally say to parents is you need to take care of yourself so that you can take care of them. When you homeschool, finding breaks is a little harder, but it is something that you can do many different ways. I've know parents who are engaged in sports leagues, parents who go on a walk as soon as other parent comes home from work, homeschool support groups. There's the online groups that can be helpful. As far as the emotional relationship with the child, I think it's very important in that sense not to homeschool 24/7. So when you're not every trip down the road needs to turn into a lecture on what those construction trucks are doing and the importance of our civic government. We need to relax and enjoy our kids. Those would be a few of my suggestions for that question. I have written on this topic quite a bit, though, and there's some information on my website that would address that further.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a concern. People are patience, energy, mind, and I think your point about taking care of yourself is an important one. Here's another big bucket of comments. Oppositional behavior, refusing to do the work, keeping your child just from playing on the computer or toys. That, sort of the fear that a homeschooled structure won't have the same, I guess, I don't know what, discipline, aura around it as this classroom where there's a teacher saying, you must do this, you must do that.
I've seen parents, and I think it was homeschool parents, who had a sign on the refrigerator that said, here's the list of chores you need to do today to get the password for Wi-Fi. I've got a friend who doesn't homeschool his kids, but he changes the Wi-Fi password every day at home. That can be done. I don't want to take the oppositional issues and refusal to work lightly. That's a serious concern, and I don't know of a different families that may be a situation where getting some family counseling would be helpful for those kids. And this is a problem whether you homeschool or not. If your son or daughter is refusing to brush their teeth now, or whatever other things you require of them, you've got problems down the road when they want to borrow your car and go places and things. So those are broader issues than I can specifically cover. A couple of things I like is, let's see, Terry Fallon's 1-2-3 Magic Parenting for the kids up to age 12 has helped some families manage discipline and structure in their household. Keith Lyman's got some good books on managing kids' behavior. And Paul Tripp, Age of Opportunity, on raising teens, it talks about that. That one's from a Christian biblical perspective, but there's other resources to help parents with those discipline issues. When you homeschool, you really do kind of need to put your teacher hat on for part of the day and say, we're working on learning right now, and here are the things we do, and just need to lay down a line.
Yeah.
It's easy to say.
Yeah, I know. But there's no video games while you're in, quote, cool school.
Oh, yeah, we don't even answer the phone.
Right. Okay, so you're in school. Right.
Right. And other families do things differently, but I had to learn, I don't always answer. The doorbell rings, unless I'm expecting someone, I let that go, and the phone messages can go to voicemail because the kids need me to be there too.
So you're really simulating a classroom situation in the sense that it is learning all the time. However, that learning takes place, but it's not, let's do a little school and then let's play video games for 10 minutes or whatever.
I think video games can be really dangerous for our distractible kids because they're designed to be engaging. It's as bad as the internet is for adults. It's just, they reward distractibility. Oh no, Mom, I can't ever, what parent hasn't heard, Mom, I can't come to dinner because I've got to finish this level. So they won't leave the video game. So yeah, I think those need to be restricted very much, whether you homeschool or not.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about legal requirements? Some people want to know, common core standards. How do you require documents and lesson plans to the school district? Just a brief comment on how that works.
Common Core doesn't apply to private schools or to homeschools. It's for public schools. It's actually to tell parents, this is what we promise our schools are going to deliver, and the public system can only require that for public schools. So it's not binding on homeschoolers. The legal requirements vary depending on what state or province you live in. So I can only speak generally on that. I can say the Homeschool Legal Defense Association keeps up excellent summaries, keeps up on the homeschool law for each state. I don't know of any state that requires a submission of lesson plans, that level of detail. Some states have what are called umbrella schools or ISPs, and they're called in California, where these organizations, these umbrella schools, function as a liaison between the homeschooled parents and the school district. For instance, Maryland has these as well. That can be handy for some families. We don't have that here in Virginia, where I homeschooled. We'd submit test results from a standardized test every year to show evidence of progress. Some schools allow you to submit a portfolio or to meet with a certified teacher who will look at the child's work and evaluate progress. There are many different ways of this monitoring progress and determining that, but they vary by state.
Okay. And you mentioned the name of an organization that you could check state requirements.
Yes.
Could you repeat that?
Certainly. It's the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. The website is hslda.org.
Okay. Sounds helpful. Another big theme in the comments is a sense of inadequacy. Some people just say point blank, I'm not qualified, or I only have an associate's degree, or I'm inadequate. But sometimes the comments take a more specific turn, such as, how am I going to teach my child physics when it comes to that, when I don't understand it. So can you comment about that issue of feeling competent, really, as a parent to teach topics?
I taught geometry at a homeschool group that provided a la carte classes for homeschooled teens. There's groups like this all over. Some parents outsource a few classes that way. I couldn't teach Spanish, but my son took Spanish there, and he also took computer-assisted design and mock trial and some other great classes. There's those sorts of groups. There's online classes. So you can outsource some of your classes. I give another workshop called Helping I'm conflating two workshops. On my website under Talks, look for the handout on helping teens overcome learning challenges. And in that talk, I address some of these questions regarding outsourcing different classes and different ways that you can do that. Because I couldn't teach chemistry very well. So I talked, and biology even, I wasn't sure about doing that, although I loved it in school. I talked to a friend of mine who homeschools. She's a registered nurse, and she said, well, I'll teach our son's biology if you'll teach him English. And we had a 3-family homeschool group going there for a couple of years. The boys had a wonderful time.
So, Kathy, basically what you're saying, I think, if I understand correctly, is you don't, as a homeschooling parent, have to be responsible for every single bit of learning. In fact, there's a tremendous resource network out there for homeschoolers to take advantage of different classes, different resources, as you put it, or as I described my friend teaching drama. So I think that seems to be one of the misconceptions, that if you're a homeschooling parent, you're going to teach everything yourself.
We outsource a lot, especially in the high school.
It's a great term. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's what we're doing, and it's very helpful. As far as the other questions about feeling inadequate generally, I know some excellent students that did a great job through homeschool whose mom has a high school degree. If you think about it, high school is a fairly recent invention, only about 100 years or so old, and schools used to be taught by people who more or less had the equivalent of a high school. Like Anne of Green Gables, what had she done? Finished 12th grade and then she goes off to teach? Certainly, you don't need a college degree to homeschool. That's no longer a requirement in my state, for instance. There's variation from state to state. But as far as that feeling of, oh, I only have an associate's degree or I don't have a degree, that's not the issue. It's teaching your child at home is an entirely different situation from being equipped to handle a group of 20, 30 some students and go through a set amount of material in a set amount of hours and meet those state requirements or Common Core. They're very unlike. These two jobs are quite different. So I'd encourage parents who feel inadequate to reconsider that, and I'm happy to try and talk with folks and encourage them specifically.
So instead of, I guess what it comes down to, if I hear you correctly, is instead of seeing yourself as imparting a specific body of information, you are describing someone whose job it is to surface their own child's interests and find resources to meet those interests, which is quite a different sort of a bottom-up versus a top-down. Does that describe it correctly? Okay.
That does. Now, some parents will be the primary instructor, especially in the younger grades. But as our kids get older, we tend to become more facilitators. And for our kids who aren't struggling in certain areas, it's not uncommon for high school teens to get the textbook, watch the videos, do some classes fairly independently, which equips them really well for work or for college.
Well, I think we're out of time. It's been extremely fascinating, Kathy. I thank you so much for all the resources you provided and for making your website available. Can you repeat the name of that website just one more time?
Certainly. It's learndifferently.com.
Learndifferently.com.
I want to thank you, and for those of my followers who are listening today, if this is your first Attitude podcast, you have found a gold mine. I really appreciate the work that the team at ADHD Expert Webinars is doing, and it's a privilege to be with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for referring everyone to our podcast. We're proud of the wonderful speakers that we have and the fact that we can make this information available for free and on a weekly basis, and it's a great pleasure for us. So thanks, everybody, and have a great holiday season. Bye.
Bye.
For more Attitude podcast and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.
You love podcasts, the stories, the laughs, the unexpected turns. But when this episode ends, the silence starts. Not anymore. Audiobooks.com turns that silence into your next great adventure. With over 450,000 titles, from bestsellers to hidden gems, your love for listening just found its new best friend. And because you already know the joy of audio, we're giving you 3 free audiobooks to start your journey. Imagine your favorite podcast, now with unlimited episodes. That's audiobooks.com. Keep the story going. Sign up for your free trial at audiobooks.com/podcastfree today. Because for podcast lovers like you, the end of an episode is just the beginning. That's audiobooks.com/podcastfree.